First thing is to get the information across, isn't it? And it's how you deliver that information that I think probably makes it a really good quality commentary or not. And so the nuts and bolts are quite simple. What's happening, what's the score, what's the situation in the game, describing what you can see, but then wrapping it up into something that sounds interesting and entertaining. So there's loads and loads of different things that you're all putting into this one little package. But it's got to be fun. That's I think what I really set it out to be. I mean, I want cricket to sound good fun. And if people listening to my commentary think, this game sounds all right, I'm going to give that a go, or I'll listen to him again tomorrow, or whatever it might be, then I think that's also very important.
How did you actually begin? Do you remember the first time you actually described fully a match or even a stint? Were you able to go straight on air, or did you do commentary into a tape first or anything?
No, I went straight on air. I'd never commented on anything before, actually. So my first year on Test Match Special, which was a very long time ago now, I was an expert summariser, which was great because it gave me insight into the programme. So although the other summarisers were Fred Truman and Trevor Bailey, and clearly I was slightly outgunned, I was able to listen to Brian Johnston and Tony Cozier and Don Mosey, Chris Martin Jenkins. So it was in at the deep end, really, which is fine because you either sink or swim. And I do think, although people might think it sounds a bit critical, but I think that I'd like to think anyway that I could probably tell within quite a short time whether somebody's capable of doing it or not. 10 minutes? Because if you can't, if you haven't got any sort of the rhythm or the information or the voice, which is also very important, you could be the best commentator in the world, but have a voice that somehow winds people up or makes them want to switch the radio off.
Because warmth radiates through a radio, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does. It's all about communication. And I imagine, especially when we're here, all those people lying in bed with their little headphones on or just listening to the digital radio, and we are, they're half asleep. And so it needs to be a soothing, relaxing sound. And one thing I always try and make clear to commentators, okay, we're lucky because we do it with a crowd, but you've got to use that crowd, and you've really got to listen to how you sound against that crowd. The crowd is they do have a tone, there is a pitch, there is a sound, and you can sound yourself melodic against it, or you can grate. And so I always have my headphones turned up a little bit louder than most people, I think, and therefore try and get a bit more of a softer tone, but also try and speak melodically.
And with that, commentary is talking, but actually the silences, or at least the pauses in commentary, are as important, because that then lets the crowd noise filter through back home, and that can say as many words as you could say.
Well, I think so. I think the pauses have got a bit shorter these days. I don't think it's quite the discipline that there was. Yes, you want the person in the car or in the garden or whatever to really feel that they are there. And of course the crowd is very much part of that. And the crowd is a great way of bringing forward the tension, the excitement situation. More than words can, actually. I mean, there's nothing worse than a commentator just blathering. You are part of the crowd. That's the whole idea of it. You're not supposed to be sealed in a commentary box, although we usually are these days, sadly. We are supposed to be 3 or 4 people sitting in a stand watching the game. And so it's important that you let that crowd noise breathe and be part of the commentary, I think.
Tell me about the leg over incident. I'm sure this won't be the first time or the last that you will talk about it. Describe what happened.
People always ask me if it was my line. He didn't get his leg over, and it wasn't. It was a guy called John Etheridge, actually, who's a cricket correspondent for The Sun now, who came up. I went down and had a cup of tea, so when Ian was out, and John came up and said, I know what our headline will be tomorrow, Agnew. He said, Ian Botham cocks it up by not getting his leg over. So I chuckled and finished my cup of tea and went back upstairs, not for a minute thinking that I was going to use this line. And Peter Baxter, our producer, then pulled the chair back beside Brian Johnson and motioned for me to sit down and to fill, because bad light had stopped playing. And it'd been a good summer. I hadn't actually had the moment to do that, which is what, again, another aspect of what our programme does. Talk and talk and talk when it's raining or bad light and there's no cricket. That's a very important part of the programme too. So there we were, and John had started going through the scorecard in a slightly naughty way. I think he'd spent much of that summer wondering who I was, because I was his so-called expert summariser. And he tried me out and tested me out, and he always pulled his incredible faces. I mean, he made me laugh. And so when he was talking about inner thighs and so on, it just came out, and the impact was massive. I mean, you've listened to it. I mean, there's sort of about a second and a half of silence when John has looked like he'd just taken a right hook, and he couldn't speak. He had gone. Bill Frindle was snorting away in the background because he loved all the sort of innuendo stuff as well, you know. And there was a point, I mean, halfway through this madness, where I really thought, you know, this actually isn't very funny anymore, and there could be very serious ramifications here, because you can't talk. I mean, again, if anyone who's done any broadcasting will know, once you've got that awful thing welling up inside your stomach, it's corpsing laughter, you can't stop it. I mean, it has to come out. It doesn't just go away. And it's impossible to speak normally and let this sort of laughter just come out. It just cannot happen. Which is always why the best, funniest moments on the radio are people trying to suppress one of these corpses. So that's why we both went. Him, obviously, completely. But he didn't think it was very funny afterwards. You know, when we went off air almost immediately after this catastrophe, he stomped off into the night. I can see him now shaking his head and thinking he'd let the side down, that it had been unprofessional, that sort of thing. And I sat there doing my reports for the Today programme next day and thought that wasn't necessarily a great career move, you know. But he soon got over it. He listened to it next day and we realised it was a classic. And it is a classic, my word. I mean, if Brian knew it's still being played now, he'd be chuffed. He really would be thrilled. And I love going out. Whenever I go and speak at dinners or something, I play it, and there's always youngsters there who've never heard it before. And people still find it infectiously funny.